Thank you very much for that beautiful welcome this morning, Trevor, to this event. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry I'm a bit late. I got stuck in some pretty gnarly traffic this morning. You obviously did much better than me at getting here on time. But obviously things are underway. It's that stage of the morning now where I need to introduce one of the most important guests in the room this morning and to set the tone for today's discussion. So would you please welcome Sally North, the WorkSafe Commissioner, up to the stage, who's going to provide us with an overview and reflect on the current state of health and safety within the WA mine industry. Sally North.
Okay, looking forward to setting the scene about how things are going in the sector today. And it was really great to have the welcome just now. I really appreciate the contribution from Trevor and his colleague. Just in terms of the department, this is a slide from the Inspectors Forum we held just last month, where we brought together inspectors from all different parts of WorkSafe to improve and continually develop both our alignment and our abilities as a regulator as we really strive to become a best practice regulator. WorkSafe is a group within the Department of Local Government, Industry Regulation and Safety, LGIS. So this is new. This has only been in place for a few weeks, so if you still feel like it's DMP, DMERS, or one of those things, you're forgiven. But we are now part of the Department of Local Government, Industry Regulation and Safety. So we are the S and it's LGIS. So the government restructured 9 departments on the 1st of July to create a separate Department of Mines, Petroleum and Exploration, the DMPE. So we're not using an acronym for that, we're just calling it the DMPE. And that's for the industry assistance and the industry regulation side of things, with the safety regulation side of things sitting inside LGIS. So that is where we are at in terms of an organisation at the moment. And then within WorkSafe, this is how we're set up right now. We've got the WorkSafe Commissioner, so my role, that's looking after, if you like, as a regulator, mine safety, petroleum safety and dangerous goods. And then through a Deputy WorkSafe Commissioner, we've got a legal service, regulatory support. We've got our industrial and regional side of general industries, what we call the general industries in the non-resources sector, the service industries and specialists, and our investigations unit, which investigates serious and fatal matters, both in resources but also outside of that as well. So we do regulate all sectors that are within the state jurisdiction. And of course, as the Commissioner, I've got the support of a strong team, including the Chief Inspector of Mines, Tony Robertson, who holds delegations to make a range of regulatory decisions in terms of work health and safety in the mining sector. So that's just a little bit about our context right now. Going on to outcomes, if you like, in terms of certainly the most severe outcomes, the fatalities. So this graph shows our fatality rates since the 90s, and you can see we did have some unfortunately very high spikes there back in the 90s, and it has definitely reduced. When we look at this, the orange line is for adjusted per million hours worked, so that gives you a sense of how it is in terms of the size of the sector. So we can see that that based on looking at fatalities per the size of the sector, we've definitely made a lot of progress, and certainly yourselves or people in the roles from years past in the roles that you're holding today have been a big part of that, and that's why it's so important that you're here today to consider how you can have an influence on these outcomes. Look, even though we've come down, we're still averaging something like 2 fatalities a year, and I do think there's more we can do around that. I do think we can better that and reduce that further. Just in terms of where these fatalities have been occurring, we can see that they have been across different parts of the state, and as you can imagine, it is a lot of that's aligned to where the work is occurring. And this is showing our confirmed work-related fatalities over this period. In terms of injury data, we can look at that in terms of occupations, and probably not a surprise that fitters certainly have a high rate of injuries, and plant occupations as well, processing plant. Underground is also standing out as underground services having significant rates as well as loading transport occupations and drill and blast. And in terms of body parts, again, I'm sure probably not a surprise, but hand injuries are still right up there at about a quarter of those injuries, and backs are up there as well. Strains and sprains and fractures in terms of what's actually happening. So this is our 12-month data set, and I guess what it does show is that it's important that we manage both the critical risks, the risks of those fatalities or near-fatal events, but we also need to be conscious of and have risk management strategies for chronic and lower seriousness ones as well. And it is an important question of how to deploy resources across both of those things. Now, when we look by commodity, I'm aware that obviously all commodities have different processes, they've got different contexts, different hazards and challenges that are inherent, and some of these are going to have more processing and elements of that type which add challenge to their context, but you can see we've got quite a variation here across the different commodities in terms of the frequency of that rate of injury. So that's a little bit about, I guess, outcomes. Obviously very reactively. We are not in such a position as yourselves where we can more readily get the proactive and leading indicators, but we do expect that you're looking at leading indicators, and I know a lot of work does get done around those, and that you won't be just solely taking a reactive focus the way I have on these slides. So I don't mean in terms of presenting this to mean that that's how you should be looking at it at your workplace, because you've got a lot more information available to you, and I'm sure you're using that appropriately. So in terms of our focus areas, we've had for a few years now WorkSafe the Way Forward, which is a 3-year strategy that we've published. And the idea behind this is to, it's only been a few years since the Work Health and Safety Act, and we really wanted to kind of pull together what are issues that we could focus on across the board, but also contextualise to different sectors. So this strategy intends to do that. That was the purpose of it. We will be looking at that and whether we refresh that going forward, and so we are certainly open to feedback around the priorities that we're focusing on. In terms of our vision is healthy and safe workplaces in Western Australia across the board, all of the workplaces, and our goals, we do have some quantitative goals there for the reduction of fatalities and serious injuries and illnesses. Now, those are aligned to the National Plan for Work Health and Safety, which is published by Safe Work Australia. And all of the states and territories, jurisdictions have signed up to that. Having said that, it is really challenging, particularly in terms of the serious injuries and illnesses, and there is a lot to do to meet those goals. And then the role of WorkSafe, we're often asked about how we see ourselves, and I'll talk more about that as I go on. But at a high level, it's to drive workplace change through education, specialist advice and enforcement. So it's not an either or, it's not a binary in terms of our role. We do a mix of things as a regulator. It's consistent with what other regulators do, and we do think that mix of activities is needed. So within the way forward, we've identified 4 priorities, and I'll just go through each of those and tell you a little bit about them. So the first one's around repeat hazard exposures, and this one has been, I guess, on our radar for a little while. And what we're talking about there is we're looking at management of hazards that can cause multiple and repeat fatalities and serious injuries, and this is intended to align with the reduction of fatalities and serious injuries. And there's a lot that goes on in this sector, and you've done a lot of work around this, and I hear some really great processes underway to identify critical risks and manage them. Unfortunately, when we look broadly at all sectors, some sectors are not as advanced as this, and as agriculture, for an example, is still our highest risk occupation when we adjust per person in the sector, and probably not as sophisticated here. But even in a sector that has done a lot of work around this, there is more to do, because it's easy enough, and I think quite clear when we look at the statistics, to identify those things that over the years regularly cause serious and fatal injuries. They won't surprise anyone in the room because they are known hazards. But what we need to get better at is being clear what are the critical controls, but going further than that, how can we ensure that we are really reliable around those controls? Because we you're working in a large sector and there's a lot of person hours on the job. And so unless we've got really high reliability around those critical controls, we will get failures, and some of those will be serious or fatal results of those failures. So reliability of that is really critical. So we're aiming to, help industry understand that. I'll talk further, and others will speak as well, about the information that we're providing around this. But as I said, there tends not to be too many surprises in terms of the critical risks. Priority 2 is around psychosocial hazards. And again, we know that this is on people's radar. We know that, it's not a surprise to know that the workers' compensation has gone up around psychosocial hazards. We see this in Western Australia. We've seen it in other jurisdictions as well. And it is something that we want to really focus on improving understanding around. We do have specialist inspectorate teams. We've done a lot of work around providing advice and information on this as well. But we know that people are still in different places around understanding what good looks like, what's good practice around this, how do we navigate some of the complexities and the intersections that psychosocial hazards have with other parts of our work. So around employee relations, for example. We know that this area is still, in terms of work health and safety, relatively new, and that there's lots of education to do. And we certainly see that when there's events around this, we are getting a lot of uptake for that. So we do have some information getting drafted around suicide prevention and being trauma informed in the workplace. We've had the recent workshops from Dr. Dean LaPlonge. The PwC capability review was done in terms of WorkSafe's mine safety's regulator capacity on this issue, and we've got a number of outcomes and actions arising from that. We've published that on the website if anyone wants to have a read. And also we've published guidance on confidentiality clauses, and we're having a look at whether we need further guidance on that topic. We've also got upcoming work around updating the guidance note on drugs and alcohol in the workplace. We have put out some information on that, but we know that the existing guidance needs to be updated as well. So there is still a lot happening there and more to come. In terms of some of those outcomes, some of the statistics from Safe Work Australia and Beyond Blue show that this is really important to employees in the workplace. People do believe that it's a key thing, but not as many people believe that their workplace is actually mentally healthy. About 30% of Australians across the board, not mining specific, think that work is negatively impacting their mental health. And really, our view is it doesn't have to. Work can be really positive for people's mental health. There's a lot we can do to not negatively impact people's mental health. So at the moment, it is still a significant portion of claims, and we know that those claims can be harder to resolve, longer lasting, and that means that it's an impact on you and your business in terms of productivity and making sure you've got the right staffing, and of course it's also a really severe impact on those persons affected. And there's estimates around what we could actually be saving the workplace in terms of having effective mental health strategies. So I guess that's the golden aim, that we could be saving billions a year across the country if we're getting this right. Respect at Work, this has been on the radar in Western Australia for a few years following the Enough is Enough parliamentary inquiry report tabled in 2022. We have published our final report summarising where we're at in terms of working towards addressing all of those recommendations. And of course, this isn't a one-off piece or a one-off project. This is integrated into our ongoing business. We do have the Mental Awareness, Respect and Safety program, which is a really big program around this, and we've increased our use of surveys. We've done media campaigns on the issue. Roadshows have aligned to it. There was a summit a couple of years ago, and we're looking at a future summit on this too. And I mentioned guidance and the capability review. So a lot going on. Moving on to respiratory hazards, we're aware of issues around silicosis. We know there's a lot of dust issues in the sector, but we can manage them well, and we'll hear more about that later. But we need to be proactive when we're talking about chronic hazards like a silica and asbestos. We need to be on the front foot to prevent illness, and I do want to call out health monitoring. I think it's really important that you've identified who needs health monitoring in your workplace and that you've got that in place, because I'm not sure that it's proper, that it's happening to the level that it needs to happen. So talk to those specialists in your workplace, make sure you've got your exposure groups defined and that health monitoring is happening where it needs to be happening, because we will be having a focus on that. As the slide advises, we've also got some specific projects there where we'll be looking at silica and at radiation risks as well, and we want to help build capacity here. Okay, and then consultation and representation. We are holding events for health and safety reps. We've got a great online system where they can get on there, ask questions, interact, and we've got resources for them. It's a really critical part of the conversation to get health and safety reps involved, because going back to the reliability of controls, who knows when things are working or not working, or the people close to it know. So, productive and constructive engagement helps, and we are very much supportive around that. In terms of our role overall, I mentioned the mix of things, and I just wanted to highlight we do have a really large education focus, events face-to-face, online, emails, and we're doing more news in that way, and other forms of education. But importantly, we're still sending inspectors to workplaces. They're using their regulatory tools, and at a smaller amount, which I'll come to in a moment, in terms of prosecution. So it is that mix of things, and that's the way we see it working. In terms of engaging with industry, you might be aware there's a number of peak bodies in place. They're tripartite, so we're hearing from different bodies there, and they are the venue through which we update codes of practice and get those out for public consultation, get those broader inputs before we finalise those, and there's a lot going on with that as well. In terms of prosecutions under the Work Health and Safety Act, we have published these on our website. There has been a handful in the mining space. Some of those are listed here. And if you want to see a little bit more about the facts or the summaries of what led to those prosecutions, I'd encourage you to get on the website at the link and have a look at them. And it does include the non-mining ones as well. So you've got those more recent ones that'll be listed there. Okay, and then just looking at the legislative framework, I know there's going to be discussions around systems, the mine safety management systems. It remains a focus area for WorkSafe mine safety. It needs the effective consultation to underpin it. We are flexible in terms of how it's done, and I think it's important to recognise that it is a framework, so it's intended to hold the pieces together rather than to cause rework, rewriting or duplication, and it's important that systems and documentation is fit for purpose, so it's the right size, scale, usability for the end users, because of course we all know that if it's not usable, if it's not getting used, it's not meeting its intended purpose. So getting that balance right and having that conversation with people, both at the workplace and potentially inspectors as well, about what's that balance look like and how can we make this a really functional piece of our risk management system that delivers as it's intended to deliver. In terms of emerging issues, just go through a couple of points there. We've got earth-moving equipment when it is used as a crane. This is a bit of a WA unique regulation in that if the equipment is capable of lifting more than 3 tonnes, safe working load, we've called it in the regulations of more than 3 tonnes, and it is used as a crane, so it's suspending a load, then there is a requirement for a high-risk work licence. There is an information sheet on our website, so if this is a task with equipment of that size that is relevant to your workplace, I'd encourage you to have a look at that information sheet. It goes through what the licensing requirement is, and also there is an exemption if people hold a specific type of alternate training specific to the use of earth-moving equipment as a crane. It commences on the 10th of August, so it's currently in that transitional period, and the information sheet will explain that. We will be exercising an educational approach over that for the initial 4 months under a published statement of regulatory intent. You'll hear more later about the mine statutory positions update, but just to highlight that the transition does end in March, and we will then be putting it into a business as usual approach in terms of our regulatory approach. One of the big changes coming up, and again more to come, but workplace exposure standards, which will be called limits in the future, are having a major update commencing in December of 2026, and so it's really important to plan ahead, look at what that may mean for you, and get organised for that. There was a welding fume exposure standard change last year, And again, we'd expect that you'd have a look at your controls to make sure that that's working, and it is something the inspector will be looking at as well. Diesel particulate matter, the workplace exposure standard for that, it is being reviewed by the tripartite body in the Commission as to what recommendations they will make around that. There has been a recommendation from Safe Work Australia, but before kind of locking that in for WA, the Commission will provide the Minister with advice on that issue. Vaping in the workplace, there has been a regulatory amendment around that, which you may be aware of. It's basically treating it the same as smoking. And then under the National Model Act, there are changes being worked through in terms of incident notification, but again, they don't kind of fall directly into WA law until we make an amendment here. So as we will be reviewing our Act, we will have an opportunity to have a look at that and see if it is suitable for WA, because while we're harmonised, we also review all of the model laws to see that it does suit before it's enacted. That review is commencing, as in we're getting our preparation done, and there will be public consultation later in the year. So if there are things within the Model Act that you want to raise an issue about, then that will be the opportunity. So that is it for me at this stage. I look forward to further conversation when I'm joining a panel, and there are some information here on how to stay up to date with WorkSafe. I'm assuming you all are because you're in the room, but do make sure you stay connected. We put out a lot of information via these mechanisms. Thank you.